channel. I just got back home from work and this is Carl's new car, E93 M3, 2011 with the LCI taillights and very nice looking color. I have to check if it's a Jerez black or a sapphire black, but let me know in the comments what color you think this is. I think it looks great. It's about 100,000 miles, so we got to get some maintenance and modifications done to it to get it where we want it to be. So first mod is going to be lowering springs. As you can see, this is a stock setup right now. Stock exhaust, stock wheels, stock ride height. So we're going to get this one lowered with the H&R lowering springs for the E93 chassis, the ones that I still have. We're going to go install them right now. So this is stock exhaust, warm start. Pretty quiet. One trick that I can show you guys if you don't have spring compressors to be able to remove this front spring on the front strut is to jack up the whole entire strut first and make sure that it's under tension, so that when you undo the top nut over here, you can slowly lower it down and the spring won't fire everywhere and violently injure somebody. So we're going to loosen this nut over here and then slowly lower this down so that the spring can slowly come down. Okay, so the nut's off. Now we're going to slowly lower this down so that the spring doesn't come flying out. And you can see the spring slowly compress or decompress. Be slow when you come down so that this doesn't fire out. And just like that, we can get the spring out now. So what I'm going to do is remove this jack. The nice thing about doing it this way is you don't have to remove the strut either. So you have to kind of decompress the spring a little and give yourself some room to get it out because it's still kind of long. Then you can get it out slowly. Okay, there you go. So now the spring's out without the need of a spring compressor, which is nice. So we're going to swap over the new spring. And you can see Carl's old equipment here is still working. We can test his spring or his strut, and his strut is still rebounding, although a little slow, and I can decompress it with my body weight. But anyways, let's get the new spring on. So here's the new spring, significantly shorter than the older one. So you're gonna put it on, make sure you line it up correctly and it sits right on its perch, like so. Like that. And then this next piece right here goes above, like so. So this spring is significantly shorter, making it easier to go back in. As you're putting the strut back into its hole, you want to be able to make sure that your spring is lined up correctly as well. We made it through. We're just going to keep jacking it up until it gets high enough and we can thread the nut back on, which is this one. It's a 21 millimeter. Okay, so we have one side done. Took about half hour. Now we're going to do the other side of the front, and then we're going to go do the rears. Alright, so we're done with the front. This is how low it went on the front. We're going to do the rear next. And I got to remind you that the springs are going to settle, so this is actually going to get a little lower. But right now, it's a lot better than before. Before it was about a 3-finger gap, now it's about a 1.5-finger gap. So fronts are done. Once we drive it around a little, it's going to get even lower. Okay, let's move on to the rears. Alright, so this is the rear spring. As you can see, it has the spring and the shock separate from each other. So this is going to be a little bit easier, but because you don't need the spring compressor, but it's also difficult because you need to line up these two bolts here perfectly with the jack. So this is where it's nice to have the help of a second person. But first, let's get this spring out. Okay, it's coming. Here we go. Okay. Okay, here's the old spring out. So you'll have two parts to it. You have the top hat here, or top part, and then the lower spring perch. You're gonna reuse those two things, and then this one can just toss it away. So I'm gonna use the lettering as my guide, whether it's upside down or not. But I believe they're interchangeable. Come on. So we're putting it right over here in that perch. Here. Okay. All right. So just like that, we have the spring on. Now we need to line up these two long bolts back into the control arm. This is probably the hardest part of the whole job. So we'll have Carl control the jack while I try to get these lined up in there. Okay, so after a couple hours later, we finally finished the car. We're gonna start it here and then drive it back and forth a couple times to let the springs settle. So here's a cold start of a stock exhaust M3 V8. So here's what it looks like after driving it back and forth a couple times. Definitely more tucked in now, the wheels. No more wheel gap. Really nice. Carl just needs some wheel spacers now to kind of get the wheels to fit flush, because they're a little bit too sunken in, but overall looks a lot better with space, or with the lowering springs. Congrats to Carl again on this E93 M3 Jerez black 2011 LCI model with the nice tail lights.